Hey everybody, this is Autoblog Podcast producer Eric here. I'm just hopping in quickly at the beginning of the episode to let you know that this episode of the Autoblog Podcast is brought to you by the SoFi Daily Podcast. Reaching financial independence starts with having the right information. So every weekday morning, SoFi keeps you up to date with important business news and stock market happenings and how they affect your financial life. So get your money right and search for SoFi, that's SOFI, wherever you get your podcasts. On with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have a great show for you today on this hot, sizzling Thursday afternoon in July. Joining me today is senior editor for all things green, Beltz Snyder. What's up, man?
Hey, just trying to beat the heat with some iced coffee today.
Sounds good. My coffee is just cold because I haven't microwaved it in a while. And chuckling at that remark, charitably, I guess, is consumer editor Jeremy Korzeniewski. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, unlike you guys, I stopped drinking coffee about an hour ago. It's well afternoon, guys.
Well, it's afternoon, which means we should talk beer, which we're going to later on the show.
5 o'clock somewhere, right?
It's 5 o'clock
Jinx.
somewhere in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're 5 to 6 hours ahead of us. So, yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this somewhere in the UK, of course, this isn't live. But hey, in London and in Rome, Berlin, Paris, it's later. So yeah, have a drink. But anyways, we're going to talk about beers and just how they sort of relate to different cars. This is a segment that came in from a longtime Autoblog podcast listener. We thought it was a great idea because we kind of do this anyway during like every show. So we thought we'd make it a little bit of a casual segment and maybe more of a recurring thing, sort of like the trivia we do occasionally. And of course, spend my money that we try to do as much as possible. So we will have a spend my money. The cars we've been driving, the Lexus NX, I spent some time on that. John has been basically subleasing our Subaru Forrester for most of the length of the pandemic, but he did take it in for some service and stuff like that. So, hey, that's, you're earning, your salary, I guess, servicing the cars. So that's in the drives/reviews section. We'll hit on some news topics, the Toyota Corolla Cross. It looks pretty interesting. I think we'll dig into that a little bit. The Audi Q4 E-Tron Sportback, and then some interesting numbers out of the J.D. Power Initial Quality Survey. A couple of unsuspecting brands are near the top. If you are on our site or have the magical power of Google at your hands, you know what they are. But we'll tell you basically our theories why Dodge and Kia scored so well. Again, then we'll talk some beer and we'll spend some money and away we'll go. So that's the show. You guys feeling good?
Feeling
Doing
great.
great.
All right. Sounds good. Let's kick things off with the Forrester long-term update. John, just what have you been doing with this thing? Tell us about some of the ins and outs as far as the any service stuff. And yeah, what's up with this Forrester that I have not seen since early March?
Well, I've been putting a lot of highway miles on it. I've been spending a lot of time going up to our cottage up north in Acura, Michigan, sort of in the middle of nowhere. So there's a lot of highway miles, a lot of dirt roads. I found that, I did a comparison between this and the Outback that should be publishing anytime now. And man, I'd much rather have that Outback on the highway, but this thing is great. You're driving around in the city. It feels really good on the dirt roads too, and I found it's really, really easy to clean up. I'm dragging a ton of sand in every time I get in this car, and we've got the rubber floor mats, the rubber cargo mat in back, and pretty easy to reach everything with the vacuum. So yeah, it cleans up really, really easy. A lot easier than a lot of other cars that we've had. A lot of other long-termers can get a lot of nooks and crannies with it. But yes, stuff just doesn't really stick to this car inside. But yeah, on the highway, it's it's definitely an improvement over the last gen. It's quieter. It handles a bit better. I like the longer wheelbase of the Outback better, just for stability on the highway. This Forrester, it gets a little twitchy. It's definitely one where you want to keep both hands on the wheel pretty much all the time. None of this, laid back with a hand at the top of the steering wheel because it just wants to. You're just making too many corrections. But yeah, I've been really enjoying it, taking it sort of deep into the woods here and there. You can see outside really well, so I keep spotting turtles in the roads. I'm saving them, moving them out of the road on these country roads, these back roads. And then, I've been taking it back out in the woods shooting. The last couple times I've gone up north, and that flat cargo area is a great place to sort of reload magazines and do quick cleanup on your guns if you get some sand or dirt in there. It's a pretty good car to drive. It does beep at you a lot. We tested the facial recognition thing for Tech of the Year, and even with that off, you're still getting tons and tons of beeps because this thing wants to move around in its lane. Anytime you get near the edge of the lane, you start approaching it, it's beeping at you, and passengers who aren't used to it are like, "What's going on? Is the car okay?" So. But overall, I've been really enjoying it. It's a great car to throw a bunch of stuff in, tents, dogs, coolers, and hit the road and get out into some of those hard to reach places.
I feel like it's really good for couples or maybe families with like one kid. I feel like anything more would be a bit much. Like we took the Forrester to a tailgate last fall, and we basically filled it comfortably, mind you, but about as full as it would be. And it was four of us, because the dog went. If there had been like a second child in there, it would have been really tight, I think. We put the coolers in the back, the dog leisurely stretched out across the front. We had the car seat, my wife in the back, and it just, you need a duffel bag, you take some food, you take some beer, you take maybe a football, wherever you're going. I'm pretty sure I've taken this camping, maybe even hunting, if I recall, now that I think about it. In fact, I did last fall, and that was just me driving up to the UP, and it was like the UP is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for those of you listening along. But yeah, it fills up quick. I feel like the Subaru Ascent is almost like the family-sized vehicle, if you will, that you kind of need to step up into. Because even just like, we were, before we had our son, driving around in the Forester, it filled up quick with two people, I mean, it's like, that's my sort of take on it. I feel like it's more of a segment thing than a knock on the Forester, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And another thing you get with the Ascent is something like 19 cup holders, which is I'm a man of many beverages. I've always got, and you are too. You've always got a few different things on your desk. I like to have tea. I like to have water. I like to have a Diet Coke. Sometimes LaCroix. And then my wife's the same way. She'll have a coffee cup, a bottle of water, and something else. And so they fill up quickly. But the Ascent, definitely it's a 3-row, so it's definitely especially even if you're not using that back row, it's better. I still think they're better. If I were going up to that size in the segment, I think I would maybe look at some of the competition. But if you're a Subaru loyalist, which a lot of Subaru people are, moving up from like an Outback or a Forester into the Ascent makes perfect sense.
I think we could easily fill up those 19 cup holders, because I often have an espresso going, like as the lead off. Then I get into the coffee mug, There's always a big water bottle going. Not always Nalgene. That's generally the province of the Snyder family. Often a LaCroix. Yeah, I mean you gotta stay hydrated. That's for sure.
You gotta plan your day,
Exactly,
especially on those long drives.
Exactly. And after you said country roads maybe 5 minutes ago about your adventures, literally I stopped hearing anything for about 5 minutes and heard the John Denver song, which really gets stuck in your head, I think, easily.
I've been humming the John Denver "Take Me Home" country since John said country roads, like exactly like what Greg just said. Like I can't get it out of my head now.
And now all our listeners are doing it too.
Right.
I gotta say, I'm picturing myself in an Outback, not a Forrester, down that country road. I gotta say, but yep, me and John Denver.
We'll have to do a pairing cars with music at some point.
Yes,
extension to the beers thing, but
I feel like it's too trite to take the Dodge Journey and give it Journey, Don't Stop Believin', even though it fits so well.
Well, it finally stopped believing after 2020.
It's true, yeah.
The Journey
Steve
ends,
Perry left
Greg.
the band. The Journey ended. Yeah, so I guess it's retired. You're right. The song lives on. Maybe give it a secondary Journey song, more like Any Way You Want It, or When the Lights Go Down in the City for the Dodge Journey. Then save Don't Stop Believin' for something that's like just absolutely epic.
How about just horsepower for Dodge? Dodge does not stop believing in horsepower.
There you go. Anyways, let's see. I'll talk about this car I've been rolling around in. That's the Lexus NX, which is, I got to tell you the color this thing had. It is cadmium orange, which seems like something you would get like a Cadbury Easter egg, maybe. It kind of looked like an Easter egg. It was more like a metallic, bright orange, sort of like an orange LaCroix, if you could picture the color of that can. This is actually the 300 hybrid. Nice. Got pretty good fuel economy. 33 in the city, 30 on the highway. It's always hard. It's an inexact science to kind of get that down. But yeah, ballpark it, sure. I'd say it got about that in my travels. Mine stickered for $50,555. That's not cheap. I feel like there's other things in this segment I would take before this. This has the 2.5 liter motor with the hybrid, components. I would say, from a looks perspective, I like this. It's divisive. It's sharp. That front end is almost like knife-like. But I'll say this: Lexus styling is aggressive. It's almost a like it or hate it look, which I think is actually a gutsy play for a brand that's so ubiquitous. I mean, when you think of a luxury brand that just is like it's everywhere. I mean, I feel like, if you're looking for a premium luxury car, Lexus isn't going to be wrong for most people. An Audi might be, a Cadillac might be. There's a number of brands that don't really fit your style. And Alfa Romeo certainly is wrong for a lot of people. But Lexus to me is like, the vanilla ice cream, if you will, as far as just its ethos. That being said, they've done a lot as far as to make their cars, really track capable, really dialing in some of the, the steering, the chassis, that sort of thing. Putting some wild, that 5.0 liter V8 they've dropped in some of their cars is really impressive.
Yeah.
So, there is a performance bent that I think they almost don't get enough credit for. All that being said, this is a pretty good hybrid SUV. Brakes, this is like the third or fourth straight Toyota I've driven that I've hated the brakes because I was in the Prius and I was in the Land Cruiser. So, I mean, different brakes for different reasons, but hybrid and then like that old school off-road feeling. But it's not a great dynamic, I'll say that. I do like that Lexus is bringing hybrid capability to this segment into the SUV buyers. I think that's a good thing. But it was a pretty generic off-the-shelf hybrid too. There was nothing about it that I thought really, honestly, I almost didn't realize it was a hybrid the first time I just drove to get some takeout. Then I was like, oh yeah, I've got the H. Okay.
Yeah, that hybrid system, Toyota with the Prius, it's been around for so long that they've really got it sort of dialed in, and it feels pretty seamless. It feels like a normal car. you're not really thinking about it being a hybrid, except maybe when you're stepping on the brakes. And I think that I quite like that quite a bit. I also am the kind of person who really likes when the hybrid aspect is in your face, and it challenges you to drive it like a super economy car, like hypermiling and stuff. But this you're just supposed to forget about it and then just enjoy when you go to the pump less and spend less on gas. But yeah, it's pretty seamless, and yeah, they know what they're doing with that. They've got it dialed in for sure.
When the NX first came out, gosh, what was it, 5 years ago, something like that? I'm not looking at it in front of me, but I actually did the initial first drive when that car was launched, and it's gone through changes since then. So this isn't like completely up to date, but at the time, I remember thinking that the hybrid, for as far as I was concerned, was the way to go, because I can't imagine a bunch of people going out and buying an NX looking for a performance bent. They don't like if you're out going for shopping for like a performance oriented crossover, I don't think you're shopping for first and foremost, probably not a Lexus and not a Lexus NX. And to Greg's point, Lexus does deserve more credit for its performance offerings, but not performance crossovers. That's not what they do. They do some really great coupes and sedans. Pour one out for the GS, which is the GSF is just an epically good car to drive with that naturally aspirated V8. But getting back to the NX, I just tend to think that people shopping in that category aren't really concerned about the turbo rush of their daily commuter. And that being the case, the hybrid just suits that car's personality, I think. And I like the technology behind it too. If I'm choosing a hybrid, I'm more like John. Like I want something to stand out to remind me that I'm driving the hybrid battery powered option. But Lexus and Toyota deserve credit for producing something seamless that is so technologically advanced. Like for instance, the NX, the whole rear axle is electrified. There's no power connection from the front-wheel drive powertrain to the rear axle, and yet it's an all-wheel drive vehicle that is that. I just think that's cool. Like for a while
the Toyota Lexus hybrid system is really slick.
Yeah,
the all-wheel drive, the way they've implemented the all-wheel drive in these cars is really clever and very efficient. For sure. Yeah,
the term's not used very often, but in the early days of hybrids, 2008, 2009, people were referring to something as a through-the-road hybrid, i.e., there's not a connection from the the gas to the electric. This isn't exactly that, because the whole front with its like super clever gearing and electronic CVTs and all that, it has that, but it's also kind of a through-the-road hybrid with the rear powered axle, which is electrified only, which is a really cool thing, and that that packaging allows them to spread that drivetrain technology across a much wider swath of vehicles. They have all-wheel drive Priuses now.
Yeah.
And it started with this NX with the powered rear axle, which I think is like a cool thing that they don't get enough credit for.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's I drove that Prius on the launch, and drove it in the snow, and it was really good. And you're sacrificing very, very little in terms of fuel economy for right. It's sort of turn on, turn off at will. It's great.
Yeah, and the packaging of it, I think, is the coolest part, because there doesn't have to be a drive shaft going from the front to the back, and that's always been the gotcha of having an all-wheel drive system, is how do you get the power from the front to the back without infringing on passenger space? Well, here's the solution. Hybridize it, put some batteries in, and electrify the rear axle. It really takes care of a lot of the packaging constraints and allows them to take that technology and spread it a lot, across a lot more vehicles. And
then you don't get the efficiency losses, the parasitic stuff from having to send it all the way through the car. Yeah,
it's smart. And they deserve credit for doing it.
I almost don't need to be here. You guys, I think, broke down the car better than I did in many ways. One thing I would add too is I wasn't a fan of the steering, primarily because I generally like Lexus steering. I think it's generally, to use the phrase dialed in, as we all keep dropping. I think it's generally pretty good in their cars. And their SUVs, especially the NX, I was not loving it. It seemed like it was a little artificial and just wasn't really what I was looking for. It's hard to knock the steering in this segment. You're not going to really get a great handling crossover this size. But, that was, I think, another thing I didn't really like. Interior was pretty nice. Lexus interiors are very solid. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Side footnote, it was great for picking up takeout because you can hit the button, hatch goes up, they put the food in your car, hit the other button, the hatch goes down. And I don't understand why every car doesn't have that. Is there anybody who wants to have their car in park or with the engine turned off so you could sweat or freeze, or better yet, jump out of your car? This just to me seems like a feature that, maybe you pay a little more for it, but why don't cars have that? It just seems so obvious, Yeah,
it's definitely, I've been using that feature a lot. The Forrester has it, and it's just a great, easy way to, if someone's bringing you something or, loading up a bunch of stuff in the car, if the driver doesn't need to get out, they don't need to get out.
Cool. So I think that's enough on the this Lexus SUV, which is pretty nice. I enjoyed it. Let's talk about staying in the Toyota family, the Toyota Corolla Cross. My first reaction when I saw this morning over my first cup of coffee was this looks like a Hyundai. I don't know, just the grille, the headlights. To me, I was like, wait a minute, what am I looking at here? But I mean, I think it makes a good deal of sense. In our story, Jonathan Ramsey, one of our freelance writers, used the term Corolla meets SUV, which I think sums this up pretty well, actually. And I think it's smart to use the name on a thing like this, just because there's only so many good car names out there. You might as well try to cash in on Corolla. In this article, Jonathan also kind of details the history behind usages like this, like the Corolla All-Track. So go to Autoblog, check it out. You can see the pictures and get some of the specs, which kind of explain this, far better than we could do in an audio format. But it will be genetically related to the CHR. So with that, what do you guys think?
Okay, I'll kick this off if you don't mind, John.
Go for it.
First comment is it is smart to use the Corolla name, and that's something that Toyota has been really good at over the years. They've been able to bolster their Corolla sales numbers for as long as I can remember by basically rolling everything under the Corolla umbrella. Even things like the Toyota Matrix, which is so very, very clearly not a Corolla, but hey, it's a Corolla. So yeah, just being transparent with it and calling it a Corolla Cross, I think is good. That's good marketing, and it's going to again help them, spread their Corolla net over a further swath of buyers. I don't like the CHR. I think it's way too style focused and sacrifices too much utility in the process. Corolla to me means utility. That's the most utilitarian compact vehicle that you can buy. So the idea of a compact crossover in the Corolla vein, it just seems like such a smart idea. I can't believe it took them this long to do it, and I'm shocked that they came out with the CHR is kind of like this, front wheel drive only hatchback kind of sort of like crossover-ish thing. Shocking to me that they came out with that before they actually did this this just makes sense move of the Corolla Cross.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I was on the launch for the CHR, and we were all just kind of like, what is this thing? Like, I mean, it's funky for sure, but man, I don't know. This Corolla Cross just seems like the better buy, across the board. And we get a hybrid too. So, which, the CHR, you'd have to live in one of the other markets. Like, I'd see them in Japan, but I, didn't offer it here. So there's a lot more options with this, and there's a lot more justification, I think, for buying the Corolla Cross than the CHR. The CHR can go away.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think, sometimes we're seeing this like really just prevalence of smaller crossover type vehicles with kind of funky styling. They're reproducing like bunnies. And I think sometimes it's like, maybe you sort of like, if you're Toyota, you look at your portfolio and say, what's the strongest hand we could play? What's the best foot we can put forward, if you will, and go with that. Who knows? We'll see what they do. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, my guess is in a normal like economy, where people are out buying, smaller SUVs, something like this badged a Corolla would probably sell pretty well. I think it's going to be tricky to launch stuff like this now, but we are seeing a little bit of a return to normalcy as far as the auto market, although, obviously things are sort of to swing back a little bit. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. I think that's enough on a Toyota Corolla for this podcast. John, you wrote a piece on the Q4 Sportback E-Tron that was revealed this week. Looks like it's going to head to production. Looks awesome. The E-Tron Quattro I drove, I want to say last spring, was amazing. And this sort of fills out that E-Tron family a little bit more.
Yeah, this shows that they're doing, they're going to do the same thing where, we've seen with other crossovers where they make a crossover coupe version of it. But this is in the realm of electric. I think it's going to get a little tricky with the nomenclature. They're probably going to have to rename the regular e-tron this is something else. But yeah, this is basically, the Q4 that's coming out. This is the e-tron version, and then there's a one with this chopped up back roof. It's considerably more busy in back, in my opinion, but I think it looks kind of cool. It's also a lot more slippery than the non-sportback version. So they're able to make it a little more efficient with its better drag coefficient. They had to put that rear spoiler pretty high up, and so there's some glass even under it to see out. The designer said that with this he got to break away from some of the other the typical Audi. He said stiff design. There's a little more curves going on here. I'm not sure how much I love it or not. I really like that sort of architectural Audi styling of most of their cars. That sort of conservative, but very structural. This has more going on, but I think where it does have things going on, it's interesting. It's eye catching for sure.
I think that's in some ways where we were talking a little bit earlier. Now I'll let you finish your thoughts. Sorry, I just randomly jumped in.
No, go ahead.
I feel like Audi, that styling will make it the right like luxury vehicle in addition to its green credentials for some people, whereas I think sometimes the Lexus, another example, maybe Acura, of brands that are just like I said earlier, a little more generic, a little more ubiquitous as far as their broad appeal. even though both of those brands arguably also have, very strong, even divisive characteristics in the styling departments. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be cool. I think, the more they could do in the e-tron space, I think is really going to I'd say make Audi more of a leader among EV companies. This is how you can sort of throw up a bulkhead against Tesla and some of the new companies that are emerging. I was talking about Nikola, which is doing hydrogen fuel cell semis earlier this morning. Rivian, Bollinger. I think if you're an existing company, you want to tell people, hey, stay home. We can give you an EV. You don't need to go to Tesla. You like Audi, you want 4 rings on your grill, stay with us. So yeah, irrespective of nothing, that's my kind of random thought.
Well, yeah, Audi's giving people eventually, once these start coming out, they're going to have a ton of options in terms of body styles, with electric, powertrain running it. They're going to have the GT. There's just a lot going on, and there's even different versions of the standard e-tron, sportier versions. So I'm interested to see what they do. They're going to keep coming out with different e-trons. There's going to the next one, or the GT, I think, is coming out on the new PPE platform, same as the Porsche Taycan. So it'll be interesting to see how these bleed over into the Volkswagen and Porsche parts of the family too, because these are all sort of modular platforms that can be shared across the brands.
Right, and I think that's.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's kind of like the secret sauce to the VW Group's push into electric vehicles. It's like, I don't know, it almost reminds me of back in the 1960s when Volkswagen took their very basic air-cooled platform and just spread it across everything from Beetles to Things to vans to squarebacks and fastbacks and sedans and everything. And this, I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same thing, but with platform modularity the way that it is right now, they can take this electrified powertrain, their battery technology, their motor technology, and they can take the broad strokes of it and apply it across the Volkswagen brand, the Audi brand, the Porsche brand. A lot of the technology that is debuting right now, we're going to see it over and over and over and over and over again, and they're going to use software and limiting battery sizes to to differentiate the vehicles. And we mentioned to get to the Q4 Sportback E-Tron, specifically the Q4 Sportback E-Tron, and can we take a moment to discuss how naming conventions are getting so difficult these days, especially from the German car companies. This is the Audi Q4 Sportback E-Tron concept. Anyway, I actually like the way it looks. We were commenting earlier on Audi's kind of their design language, which is I don't remember exactly what you refer to it as, John, but kind of okay, sure.
that's what the designer said.
Yeah. What I like about it is they're playing to their historical strengths, but also modernizing it. Their historical strengths, people of a certain age, our age, specifically, think back at the Audi Quattro coupes with the big muscular fenders, and they're spreading that along their lineup. If you think back to the luxury car companies, Audi was kind of the first one to branch out into the big prominent grille also. And they're carrying forward with that, except they're giving it that cool high-tech look now, instead of a big air opening to feed a radiator. Obviously, that's not needed anymore. So we're going to make it look really techy with these you know, architectural sort of like lines and like the metallic coverings and stuff on them. I don't know. I think it's cool, and it's exactly opposite to what the market leader Tesla is doing, which is basically removing grills and just kind of like putting the outline of where the grill would be. Audi's doing something different, and they're saying like, yeah, this car doesn't need a traditional grill, but we're going to take our history and our styling, and we're going to modernize it and make that it's different, but it still like matches the rest of our lineup. So I don't know. I think it's really cool. I think if they can actually turn this concept into a production vehicle and just tone it down a very slightly bit, but still make it stand out like that, I think they're on a good path.
Sounds good. So speaking of someone on a good path, how about we talk about Kia and Dodge, who had a strong showing in the J.D. Power initial quality report that just came out. Jeremy, you wrote the story. Would you go ahead and take us through it?
Yeah, I think the big shocker of the report was Dodge. Like, when I was on the conference call when they were announcing the rankings, and the first thing I did when I saw them is post into our little online communication channel that we use for the Autoblog editors, and I just said, you're never going to guess who's leading the J.D. Power initial quality study. No one guessed, and that's because we don't think of as FCA as a brand being like the leader of quality. There's a lot of good things going for FCA. With the Jeep and Dodge brands specifically. But, initial quality, probably not what we would have thought. But when they started breaking it down, it made a little bit more sense. The first thing that people who are listening to this are probably thinking is, like, of course Dodge is doing well because they've been making the same vehicle for, a decade. And there's truth to that. They've been able to take their couple platforms that they use, specifically the Challenger, Charger, Durango platforms, and at this point they'd have to be doing something really wrong if they weren't able to get it right. And there's truth to that. But digging a little bit deeper, they're giving their customer base exactly what they want. They're putting their high horsepower, naturally aspirated and supercharged Hemi engines in everything that they've got. And who hasn't asked for more power? So, Dodge buyers are happy to get that. Looking even further, their Uconnect software is excellent. And, if there's one thing that J.D. Power has kind of gotten criticized for a bit, is for hanging so much of their quality, reliability, and dependability rankings on the quality of vehicle software. And there's some truth to that because the software is updated constantly and changing constantly, and it's upgradable after the initial purchase. So something like initial quality that is tested after 90 days, well, that stands to potentially improve without any hardware updates as the owner brings their car into the dealership and the software gets updated, upgraded, etc. But credit where credit's due, Dodge and FCA as a brand, their Uconnect software has consistently been some of the best that is out there. And looking through the numbers a little bit more, you see that there's very few Japanese brands in the top. After saying like you're never going to guess who's leading, the second question is you're never going to guess who the top Japanese brand is. There's only one Japanese brand in the top 10, and that's Mitsubishi. Who saw that coming, right? Like, yeah. But again, it kind of goes to that, like, what are the customer's expectations? What is it that this car company is? Who are they marketing to? Who are they selling to? And knowing the audience, I think, is important. Mitsubishi knows their audience, and they know how to deliver the product that their audience, that their customer base is looking for. Scrolling through some of the other leaders, Dodge and Kia tied with scores of 136, and just breaking that down really quickly, that means 136 problems or issues reported by owners per 100 vehicles. So that's greater than a 1-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. And that again goes to show they're not basing these rankings on vehicles that die in someone's garage, or they don't get them to work in the morning. That's not what these rankings are for, because very, very few brand new cars have that kind of problem. What they're saying is, I had a problem or a difficulty connecting my Apple iPhone to the Bluetooth and listening to my podcast in the morning. Right. That ranks as a problem. Someone who has a hard time figuring out their navigation directions, how to input something, that goes as a problem. And they're telling. Like, you look at the most luxurious brands out there, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Cadillac, Acura, Porsche, Audi. You see that those brands that offer the most technology and the most complicated systems are the ones that rank poorly. So it's an interesting list. I've long thought that this is the kind of list that you have to take with a grain of salt, because it's what are you basing your quality rankings on? Is if the transmission dies in the first year, is that a bigger sign of overall initial quality than I had trouble connecting my Bluetooth? It is, for sure. But if you take the rankings as what they are, like a snapshot into the mind of a car buyer in the first 90 days of ownership, they're useful. And I'll leave this last parting thought before I let you guys comment on this. This is the first year that Tesla was included in the rankings, and you can guess where they finished.
Yeah, that was wild to see that. They didn't. Tesla didn't give JD Power permission to survey their customers, but they did anyway. And yeah, they ended up last. That doesn't totally surprise me with the amount of issues and things that have to go back to service right away. Customers have long complained about that part of Tesla ownership.
Right.
I'm intrigued by owning a Tesla just because I feel like a Model 3, I see a lot of them on the road, or a Model S, which I actually think is the better, more beautiful car. But the actual ownership experience worries me. Like, I feel like we've all made that big purchase that you want it, you're excited, you get it, and then it's like, it's kind of broken right out of the box.
Right.
Or you do something wrong, and then you're like recalibrating while at the same time still experiencing some dissonance. Like, well, it's okay, I'll do it this way. But then you're like, this isn't as good as I wanted it to be, and that's like literally my biggest concern about owning a Tesla.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. We were like getting back to what I was like cautioning our listeners or readers about the JD Power is like, take it for what it is. I think the caveat is Tesla. Like, they're the ones who are breaking that rule, because owners of like new owners of Teslas, they're not having trouble connecting their Bluetooth. They're having trim pieces fall off, or a rear seat that isn't. If you follow like Tesla owner groups, which I do a little bit because it's an interesting topic to me, and I know some people who are in the market for new Teslas. Even my brother is considering buying a Tesla to replace his current Audi. And so I'm following this kind of thing, and like the issues that people are complaining about in, say, a Lexus is they don't like the input method, the joystick or little mouse or touchpad, whatever it is for the infotainment. people who are complaining about Teslas are saying like, things like, I got the car and the trunk wasn't lined up properly, or, the rear bumper fell off when I drove through too deep a water, or a lot of people are seeing issues currently right now where their rear seat isn't properly, like the base of the seat isn't properly attached to the rest of the vehicle. And the seat is made to be able to pop out and, access all the stuff that's underneath it. But people are getting the cars and the seats popped out already. Like, that's the kind of thing, like, if you're judging initial quality, well, of course Tesla is last if they're delivering cars with seats that aren't properly attached, or, with trim that's falling off, or body panels that aren't aligned right, or imperfections in the paint directly from the factory. That's not what other car companies are getting judged on, but that's currently what Tesla's getting judged on, which, cut them some slack. They're really new, and building cars at this level isn't that easy. But then the flip side of that argument is Tesla as a brand is currently worth more than any other company in the world. So like, with that kind of like money and expectations behind it, they've got to be able to screw their cars together.
I went to a sort of a teardown of a Tesla, I want to say Model S, about a year ago, and it was done by sort of a local intelligence engineering, like analytical firm here in Detroit. And their conclusion was, like, underneath the skin, the electrical components, all that stuff is like next level, how good they are at it and how sophisticated they are. But then the gentleman who was sort of doing the walk around was like, just the actual like coach building part of it, which, we've been doing for 120, 130 years. There's nothing new there. Tesla doesn't really need to reinvent that. He's like, this is like so shoddy. It's like there's gaps. It's like it could depend on the car you get, So that was like his big sort of takeaway. I remember the stories at the time were pretty controversial because I can't remember if we actually did anything or not on it. Maybe we talked about it on the podcast, but I know some of the daily journalists in town did stuff. And it was very controversial because people were like, who is this guy? He's going after Tesla's like quality and stuff. But, he was like, yeah, it can be really good. It can be really good on a car by car basis. It can be really good on a part by part basis. So it was interesting.
You remember those Lexus commercials from the 1990s when they'd start the car, they'd run it, they'd put it on this like pedestal, and then they'd put a marble. They put champagne glasses on the hood while the car was running and show how smooth it was. And then they'd take marbles and they'd run them down the panel gaps, showing that like everything is just right. Yeah, that's the exact opposite of what we're seeing with Tesla. Like, you start the marble test in the panel gaps, and it eventually falls through one of them because the gap got really big. It's like exactly what the Japanese premium brands are going for, is screwed together so perfectly, and the pinnacle of reliability, which is that's kind of Toyota Lexus. Tesla is the opposite. Like, we're going to stretch the boundaries. We're going to take the technology as far as we possibly can, and we're going to consider all of you guys beta buyers, until we get this just right. It's the exact opposite. Like ethos of car manufacturing. And I think if buyers know what they're getting into right off the bat, then great. But I do think, getting back to JD Power, the fact that they're polling these Tesla owners and Tesla's getting worse scores than everyone else tells me that not everyone who goes out and buys Tesla knows exactly what they're getting into.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's really good analysis. And on such a high level there by a experienced senior editor, I think we should transition to something equally as erudite. How about we talk some beer?
Yeah.
That's a weird transition, but hey, Jeremy's like, really laying out this, top-notch analyses. And I'm like, yeah, let's throw a little bit of a happy hour here. But anyways,
I love beer. I'm all for it. I'm in it.
All right, all right. The idea for this came from longtime podcast listener Todd Love. Thanks for writing in. Thanks for listening, and thanks for all of you out there who are longtime listeners and maybe have ideas like this. Basically, what he wrote in and said was, "Hey, you guys talk about beer fairly semi-regularly. Why don't you actually do a segment on it?" So, since this is a segment about beer, we didn't want to script it out too much. I'll give the standard disclaimer. If you're enjoying a beverage, please do it at home, or a designated driver, all that sort of, disclaimer. We're not advocating anything of the illegal or, not wise variety here. But if you're on your patio or on a Zoom call, like we are, talking cars with a couple of your buddies, then by all means. So the thought process here was, what sort of cars or vehicles or trucks or SUVs relate to a specific kind of beer? I threw this email to you guys last week, and man, this is some in-depth reporting here by John Snyder. He's got 9 or 10 of them. Like I hate to break it to you, but we're not going to win the Pulitzer for a podcast segment on beer. So, right. But still, needless to say, way to steer into it. So why don't we do a round robin, each kind of go off with a couple of ones that just kind of came to mind. This was almost as much like a mental exercise as it was any sort of, let's get really metric about it. But John, why don't you give us a couple of yours? We'll start there.
Okay, so I sort of if this was a pairing, I thought about it in a couple different ways for some of these. Like some of them, this beer is this car, and some of them are like, this is the beer that I would want after driving this car, sort of thing. But most of these are like, this beer relates to this car. I'll start with the Mercedes GLS. I picked the Oddside Brewing Mayan Mocha Stout. It's a fantastic, very robust stout, very large in flavor, and sort of a lot going on. And but they make a bourbon barrel aged version of this Maya Mocha Stout. It's got, I should say, this has habanero in it and chocolate, and is just super good. So the bourbon barrel aged, you take the GLS, which is this robust thing, age it in bourbon barrels, and you get the G class, probably an AMG version that's very hot and very big. And offers a lot and is very robust and flavorful.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like
Outside Ales, they do some far out things. I'll just, as the name implies, but go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh no, I like where John went with that. So you take the practical one, which, I mean, no one's calling a Mercedes GLS practical. But compared to the G Class, it makes a heck of a lot more sense. No one's buying a G Class because they're hauling their family and kids around, but wealthy people with the means, they buy GLSs there's their family vehicles. But you kind of flip the wick a little bit and light things up a little bit more by bourbon barrel aging. Mm-hmm. And suddenly the connection between the GLS to the G Class, the connection of your regular mocha stout to the aged mocha stout, I get it. I like where you went with that.
Why don't you give us one of yours, JK?
Okay, yeah, let me take a look at what I wrote here. So I started with the Cadillac CT6. So I currently live in Columbus, Ohio. Well, outside of Columbus, Ohio. The biggest, I don't know if it's actually the biggest, but in my mind, the biggest Columbus-based brewery is Brewdog, which actually is a Scottish brewery. But I don't know the story. I don't know how this Scottish brewery branched out into the United States and chose Columbus as their breakout market. But they did, and now there's 3 locations and an entire hotel that is all beer themed. Wow. Which I haven't stayed at this hotel yet, but you're darn right I'm going to, because you come in, you pick your favorite beers, and they put them on tap in your hotel room. They do beer pairings with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all of that. That's a dream vacation for me, and my wife has agreed that we're going to go as soon as coronavirus is kind of passed. But
Oh, wow.
so
Do you want to double? That sounds amazing. That is like the most awesome. That doesn't sound like vacation. That sounds like heaven is what that sounds like.
yeah, and it's
almost like
right
a
here in
winery,
Columbus, Ohio.
only with beer.
Yeah, right here in Columbus, Ohio. So that's BrewDog. So Elvis, he's like kind of intertwined with Cadillac, right? Like people think this pink Cadillac with the tail fins is kind of like the Elvis mobile. So I'm taking BrewDog Elvis juice and equating it with the current Cadillac flagship, the CT6. You could go Escalade. I mean, Escalade's really probably the flagship. But instead of going that route, I'm going to take CT6, give it the black wing because that's such a cool engine that probably isn't going to be seen anywhere else. And so the BrewDog is the Elvis juice is a grapefruit infused IPA. And it is absolutely delicious. That grapefruit, gives it a little bit of a pink tinge. So pink Cadillacs, Elvis juice, Cadillac CT6. That was my thinking there.
I dig it.
Okay, I'm going to go with a super deep cut here, but stay with me. I think I can pull it all together. I'm going to go with a beer called the Scapa Special, which is a brewery from a brewery in the UK. The car or the vehicle I'm going to pick is the Land Rover Defender for obvious reasons. British car, British beer. I had this beer on a Disney cruise once a few years back, and the cruise stopped in Scotland. And one of the places we stopped was the Orkney Islands, which are kind of like right by Scapa Flow, which is famous as just a really kind of cool part of, Scotland and the UK and just that part of the world, famous for where the German fleet was sort of captured and stored in 1917 after the armistice. The Germans surrendered and the Allies took their fleet away. Long story short, there's a picture of a battleship on the bottle of beer. And I thought, hey, that's cool. I'll have that one. That was the thought process for selecting the beer when I was having said beer on this cruise. And, it was around the time we were hearing sort of rumors of what the Defender was going to be. And it was really just a lot of mental association. I think I remember at the time Googling Defenders on my phone, trying to figure out what was going to happen next, Googling the different ships that were sunken in the harbor at that time. Sort of a side note to history is that rather than let those ships fall into the Allied hands, the German Navy scuttled them, most of them, or set them on fire. So it's really kind of, quirky footnote to World War I, which I happen to know a little bit about. Battleships are interesting to look at. I don't know, why not? And when you're looking for a beer in a foreign country, you don't really know what the right, I could tell you what the ins and outs of Michigan beers are. When I'm in Scotland, I'm not really sure which way to turn. So, hey, sure, I'll take the one with the battleship on it.
I like that. I mean, I think I speak for all of those listening that we didn't know where you were going with that, Greg. But you did. You kind of tied it all together, the Land Rover Defender, the battleship. And I think it's awesome that beer led you to increase your knowledge of history through Googling the World War I, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So good on you for turning beer into more than just a drinking exercise.
That's the Scapa Special from the Swanee Brewery. With that, I'll turn it over to you, John. Give us another one.
All right. Going with the Acura Nsx. So the last pick, that was one of my favorite beers. This one is one of my favorite cars. I love the Acura Nsx. I'm talking current gen. Anderson Valley Brewing Company makes this Goza, and they make different flavors of it. But one of them is a gin and tonic version, so it's got a little bit of juniper and stuff in there. Goza, it's sour, it's salty, got a little bit of coriander in it, and then they add some of these other flavors that you would associate with gin. So the Acura NSX, very crisp. A lot going on though, in terms of hybrid power, internal combustion, turbocharging, and so that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of this Goza, very crisp. All these sort of different flavors coming together really, really, really well. And both of them are ones that you could just drive real fast for a really long time.
Boy, I'm sold. You literally, it's gin and tonic weather, I would say. You want a light drink maybe on the patio after work, you're reading or, refereeing the kids, whatever you're doing. A gin and tonic this time of year, I think, is quite refreshing. Let's put it that way. I have some Griffin Claw gin. Definitely, I think I'd have one of those tonight.
It's always time. You guys don't know Greg like we do, but it's always time for Greg to have a gin and tonic. He's definitely a connoisseur.
I used to be more into it than I was, to be perfectly honest. I just kind of got into different things like wines and, I don't know. Then my son was born and he got up very early, so I kind of wasn't drinking for a while. But yeah, gin and tonic, tried and true.
Yeah. Okay, I guess it's my turn for the next year. And I'm going to set you up with this one, Greg.
Okay.
So, you guys can't see our list, but I'm jumping in our list of things that we're going to talk about.
I tell you what, how about we just do this again? So, like, if you need to save a few, bank a few, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one for the Jeep Wrangler and the Dodge Hellcat Red Eye series, but I'm going to the next one on my list because I think it's going to play into Greg's potential choices. I'm going with the entire Buick lineup.
Okay, bold play.
Yeah, the entire Buick lineup. And I am equating it to a beer that most of our listeners, unless they live here in Ohio where I do, they probably do not know this brewery. But I'm going with Wild Ohio Brewing. Specifically, their Daily Palmer lemonade flavor tea beer. You guys can't see it. I'm holding a can up right now that the rest of our staff can see that are watching this, Greg and John. But yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like, lemonade flavored tea beer. Everyone knows the Arnold Palmer as the half tea, half lemonade. And that's basically what this is, except it's like throw in the beer side of things as well. So first of all, it's gluten-free. So if that matters to anyone out there, it doesn't matter to me. I take all the gluten I can get. But for those who are specifically looking for gluten-free, this is. Nice. It's a tea beer, so it's not made with traditional, barley, rice, that kind of thing. It's got green tea, black tea, and monk fruit extract, along with citric acid to make it, citrusy and lemonade-y. And it's absolutely delicious. And the reason I equate it with the Buick lineup, Arnold Palmer wasn't just a famous golfer, wasn't just a heavy consumer of tea and lemonade drinks. He also was a car guy. And he owned several dealerships when he was alive, including Cadillac dealerships and also Buick dealerships. I don't know about you guys, but I think of Buicks as the choice for, the kind of people who are likely to go pick up, 18 rounds here and there.
Sure.
Throw their clubs in the back, whether it's their crossovers or their Regal wagons. I don't know. They like Buick golfing works for me in my head. Arnold Palmer was a Buick dealership owner. So yeah, I'm going the Buick lineup and the Wild Ohio Brewing Daily Palmer tea lemonade beer.
When I think of Buick, the only thing I can think of is German sports sedans blasting around the Nordschleife. I don't think of Golf at all. I don't know what you're talking about. I say that.
Oh, come on.
Tongue firmly in cheek
golfing.
right there.
Buick and golfing. And okay, here's the handoff to Greg.
Yeah.
Do you know where Arnold Palmer was from?
Columbus, Ohio? Or is that Jack Nicklaus?
No. That's not Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer was from Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Latrobe, Pennsylvania, home of Rolling Rock.
Rolling Rock.
Oh, that's such a great tee up. All right, so I threw a bunch of other ones on there, and but I'm definitely gonna go to that one next now. But yeah, I agree with you. I think of Buick. I think of Golf. I think when Golf really took off in really widespread popularity a couple times in the 60s and then in the 90s, when Tiger Woods, really made the sport like must-see TV, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Buicks were great cars in the 60s. By the 90s, they were kind of, sort of on the downside a little bit. But yeah, I agree with that theory. And then Rolling Rock. This is not quite as off the wall as my Battleship comparison, but Jaguar is based in New Jersey as far as their sort of like U.S. sales operation. It's where when editors, salespeople, if you will, just basically anybody in North America outside of, say, a consumer needs to deal with Jaguar or Land Rover, you talk to somebody in a suit in New Jersey. So my thought is, okay, let's tie this together. And stay with me here. When my dad was in the service in the early 60s, he drank Rolling Rocks. He was stationed at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which I believe is now closed. Old fort that, I'm sure has been closed for decades. I drank Rolling Rock when I was a youngster, if you will, in college. It's a rather light beer, so it's easy to drink when you're maybe just adjusting your palate. It's still, frankly, a good beer, I think, to drink when it's about 110 degrees. I have no issues with it. It was actually, when I was at Michigan State, chicken wings were 10 cents and Rolling Rocks were $1. So you could have, on Wednesday nights, at this one bar on campus, you could have a pretty good night for about $10. All of this is to say it's a pretty light beer. What's lightweight? We've already established that Jaguar Land Rover is in New Jersey. How about the Jaguar F-Type Svr, which cuts off plenty of weight over the the standard F-Type models, just using some back of the napkin calculations. The wheels save you 30 pounds. The carbon ceramic braking system, and now I'm just getting it straight from Jaguar.com, JaguarUSA.com, saves 46 pounds of unsprung weight. So yeah, wow. I mean, if you want a lighter beer to pair it up with a lighter car, sure, that's my comparison. I know some of my friends at Jaguar PR are probably like, dude, you're comparing us to like this Rolling Rock beer based on this random family anecdote, but sure.
No, I think that's great. Like, this is my new favorite podcast segment.
Yeah.
And also, like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with an inexpensive light beer.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing wrong at all.
Technically, Rolling Rock's not a light beer per se. There is a Rolling Rock light, but it's definitely lighter compared to in comparison bourbon barreled,
right,
kerosene infused, lighted on fire stouts.
Yeah, totally. And like, Rolling Rock as a cheap beer, you always have to have some cheap beer in your fridge. You have to. Like, those days that you're out doing yard work, you just finished mowing the grass and you're hot and sweaty and you walk in, open up your refrigerator. What do you want? You don't want the bourbon barrel-aged stout. You want the light American lager or Pilsner or whatever it is. Rolling Rock fits the bill. I'm all for it, Greg. Love it.
All right, so I think we're getting a little tight on time here, and we may be getting a bit indulgent here. Hopefully our readers are still with us, or listeners are still with us. Let's each do one quick one, just real quick explanation. We'll do a round robin, and then we'll spend some money on cars, not booze. Start with you, John.
I did the Mazda Miata. It's Black Rocks Brewing 51K IPA. Very, very good. very crisp, but hits you in the face with a lot of flavor. There's a lot to take in, and a lot of it's a sort of a heady beer, and Miata is sort of a heady car. There's not too much to it. This is a IPA that comes in a can. Mazda Miata is not, it's a good replacement for some of the the whale of IPAs out there that you want to find. So there you go.
Jeremy?
Yes, sir. I'm going to go to Jeep Wrangler, Jeep Americana, classic red, white, and blue Wrangler. This time of year, I'm thinking, it's summer. People take the top off. They go cruising in their Wranglers. If this was winter, I could make a case for something else, but it's summer. So Wrangler, classic Americana. What's the big classic American craft brewery? Sam Adams. Jeep Wrangler, summer, beach, etc., etc. Well, Sam Adams makes a delicious summer ale. It's a citrusy wheat beer infused with lemon zest, that kind of thing. So yeah, I equate the Jeep Wrangler with Sam Adams Summer Ale.
Very nice. I like the Summer Ale. It's a good golfing beer too. Pretty tasty. I had one.
Going back to Buick, are we?
Well, actually, I'll tie that together with Ford. I was actually golfing with some people I know from Ford a couple of years ago. I had a Sam Adams Summer Ale, and then there were extra beers left over, so I brought a few home.
Nice.
Yeah, it was at the local place, local golf club, so it was cool. All right, I'll be quick here. Aviator Gin. John got me on the gin and tonics, so I'm going to say Aviator Gin, which is pretty solid. Can't beat that. And I'm going to take a Spiker, which, if you're thinking of cars, you're like, that's a pretty deep one. But I'll go with Spiker, the C8 Aileron, which is one of their more recent supercars. Spiker has a long history in aviation. They originally made biplanes 106 years ago. Also, for the First World War, their logo, their crest is a propeller, which, good trivia, is also BMW's emblem as well. But the Bimmer logo spins faster, so it looks more like a circle, whereas this is a straight-up propeller. Gin and tonic, I'll leave it there. Let's do this again sometime, guys.
That's good. Yeah, heck yeah.
All right, so let's spend some money. All right, just rolling down here to the Spend My Money segment. Here we go. All right, another long-time listener. So thanks for listening. So here's the history, and then I'll get to the question. As a teenager, had an interesting array of cars. Had a 1969 280 SL. That's awesome. I drove a 62 SL, which is a little bit older, a little bit of a different car, but still. His father still has the car. He might get to inherit it. That's pretty awesome. Got to drive this around in his late teens, early 20s. It's a great way to spend your late teens and your early 20s. Also had a 1985 Chevy station wagon. Learned to drive on a Standard. Great use of the language there. 1976 240D Mercedes. Had a few Buicks and Oldsmobiles while growing up. So that ticks a couple of boxes here for both of my co-hosts. First car he drove was a 99 Honda Civic Si back in Canada, which is kind of interesting. We'll bring Rizwick in maybe at some point if we need to. He's Canadian, for those of you that don't know. Then he had a 2005 Mazda 3, all new with a manual. Right now, and then the context there is had to shift to minivans. Okay, that's okay. Don't be sad about that. He wrote sadly, but I think a lot of minivans are great. Right now they have a 2015 Outback owned and a 2018 Pacifica leased. We had a long-term Pacifica that was pretty good. It was probably the equivalent of having a leased Pacifica. He also rides a 2014 Ninja 1000 in the winter. Planning to give the Outback to one of his daughters and buy himself a car. Here's the short list. Kia Stinger with the V6, Genesis G70, again with a bigger engine, a Golf R. Okay, couple other options he might look at. Honda Accord, Mazda 6, Hyundai Sonata. The criteria is must be fun to drive, must have 4 doors, back seats must be usable, so the Civic is going to be too small, must be new, they're going to lease, And again, looking for a sedan or better, i.e. wagon/hatch, no SUVs, comfortable interior. 2 categories. Boy, he really lays this out. I love it when like spend my money writers sort of like, already analyze, they pre-analyze their question. One's below 40 grand, one's above that obviously, but still within the window of under 50 grand. This is from Andrew. What do we think, guys?
Okay, so he said Kia Stinger and Genesis G70, same platform. The Stinger is a little bigger. I like the G70 better as a driver. The Kia Stinger is super fun. The G70's got a little more like crispness to it. That said, the G70 back seat is pretty tight. So I'm going with Kia Stinger on the high end. I'm really digging the Mazda 6, the turbocharged Mazda 6 with the signature trim level. It just feels really, really nice. The suspension is excellent. It's really dialed in. The way it corners is it's surprising. But that'd be the car I'd pick in that tier of vehicles. So Stinger and Mazda 6.
Very cool. Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I usually like to come to these things armed with something that you wouldn't expect. This time I looked at at Andrew's list, and I pinpointed straight to the Stinger. I hate to be a broken record, but so Andrew mentioned, as you said, Greg, he had broken his choices out to under 40,000 and under 50,000. Either way, I'd go Stinger. You can get a Stinger for less than $40,000 with the 2-liter. He specifically mentioned the turbo V6, but don't discount the 4-cylinder Stinger, especially when you're comparing it with vehicles in your list of the Honda Accord, Mazda 6, and Sonata. The Stinger with its 4-cylinder rear-wheel drive platform is still dynamically a very cool, fun car. So if you're thinking of the Stinger as one of the higher end examples with the 6-cylinder, also consider it as one of your more mainstream examples with the 4-cylinder. But either way, I'm sticking with the Stinger. I think it suits your criteria. You seem like the kind of guy who likes something a little bit different that you're not going to see coming and going all the time. Stinger will give you that. It'll give you rear-wheel drive driving dynamics that I think will appeal to you. And you prefer wagons, hatches. The Stinger meets your hatchback criteria. So, I just think that of what you're looking for, Andrew, the Stinger meets your criteria the best, and I think you'd have fun with it. So that's where I'm going.
It's a tough field, and it's actually kind of fun to actually talk about sedans. The Golf R was actually on there too, is an intriguing option, although I think you're going to have a lot of compromises with that back seat, which Andrew mentions is a problem. I think the Accord is absolutely a gorgeous car, especially in the top trim with the 2.0 2-liter turbo. Mazda 6 will drive a little bit better, and they're about the same in the looks department, really good-looking cars. So that's the two I would kind of look at as far as really getting a great value. The G70 and the Stinger, I vacillate. I go back and forth between which one I like better. We had a long-term Stinger, and it was amazing to drive. I thought it was so much fun. But the Genesis is really good, too. In fact, I feel like the last time I actually got into the G70, I was like, oh, I think I like this better than the Kia. So for me, I'm not as entrenched with either one of those, but they're worth looking at, worth driving. I would humbly suggest the Dodge Charger. If you're looking for a rear-wheel drive sedan, what's not to like? That's like one of the original red meat and potatoes, cars that are on the market. So that's another good one to consider, I think.
Scat Pack.
Scat Pack, yeah.
Charger Scat Pack, right? You get the big naturally aspirated Hemi V8, which is stupid powerful, and it fits right into your into your budgetary concerns as well.
Yeah. But as far as I'm looking at this list, just from the list here, I would play it safe and go with the Accord. I really like how it looks. That wouldn't have been my pick even a few years ago, just because I think the Accord was pretty plain, pretty boring. But for me, it really does come to looks. I think it's a gorgeous car, and that's where I would probably land. Unless you want to again jump out and see how a Charger fits your needs, if you will. All right, so we will leave it there. Pretty long podcast this week, but hey, listen to it in chunks, maybe while you're having a beer on the patio, walking your dog, or whatever it is you need to do this weekend. Guys, it's been fun. Any final thoughts?
Beer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thirsty now.
All right, we're recording this on a Thursday. It's getting late in the day. Thursday, I think, is a great happy hour evening, so we will leave it there. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time.